There is 3 sleeps to go till Christmas. I don't know. How does that feel when I say that to you? Do you feel like, oh, yeah, Judy, I've got everything sorted. I am ready to go for 3 sleeps. My meals all organized. My gifts are all organized. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. I know what food I'm taking to someone's house. I wonder who feels like that right now. Okay. Oh, the organized people down the back said yes. Or did I just make you anxious when I said all of those things that you needed to do? And I wonder who's going shopping tomorrow. Who are the crazy people that are going to go shopping tomorrow and Tuesday? Oh, well. There's so many different emotions you can be feeling right now. But you know what my prayer has been for today? That actually this would be a time to pause, to take a deep breath in, whether you've got it all sorted or you don't, but that in this moment, the next half an hour or so, I could go for hours, but the next little while, that you would actually take a deep breath in the presence of God and allow that peace to fill you, whether you've got things you need to do or you're all sorted, because we all need to just sit in the presence of God. So I'm really thankful. My family, we don't buy individual gifts for everyone. We do KK, which is very simple and efficient. So we have a big budget, so you can buy someone a present worth so much money, and I love it because then I just have to do one person. Yeah, that's the way to go. And then my niece, who is the only child in our family, gets a present from everyone. So she's like, I cheekily said to her the other day, like, who are you buying a present for? And she's like, no, everyone's buying a present for me. 8 years old, 9 years old, and she knows what's what. But yeah, I love the way we do it because I feel like it's so stressful getting gifts because, I just feel stressful. Even getting her gift, I'm actually not sure I've got the right gift for her this year. Last year I was scoring, but this year, not so much. Anyway, I can blame my job for that probably. But giving gifts is an expression of love. So maybe I might go to the shops tomorrow and get some extra things for my niece. But it's an expression of love, isn't it? And whether you're Christian or not Christian, everybody buys gifts at Christmas. I used to work with people that were not Christians, but they would buy gifts for people, and I never understood why. Like they didn't want to miss out on this gift-giving business. But so whether you know Jesus or you don't, actually giving gifts is an expression of love to someone that you're in relationship with. It's a connection. It's saying, I see you, I love you, and I want to give you this. And if you're a kind of person that feels very loved when you get gifts, then they are speaking your love language. But Jesus was given gifts, and we read some of that last week, and we're going to pick up that story in Matthew today. But Jesus was given gifts, and his gifts were given to honor a king, to honor someone of royalty. And they were a very expensive gifts. They were not something you would just go down to Target or Big W to buy. They were worth a lot of money. And so we're going to read some of the story in Matthew, but we're going to start with Matthew 1:1 today, and just pick up just right at the beginning, what is said about Jesus. And so let's read. If we just go to, thank you. Matthew 1:1, it says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem, asking, where is the new king of the Jews? We saw his star as it arose, and we have come to worship him. We have come to worship him. These wise men are not called wise men for no reason, are they? They actually were people that knew things. They were astrologers, astronomers. They knew about science, about agriculture. They were smart people. And they knew when they saw this star that a king was born. And then they were heading to find him. And so they came to Jerusalem looking, and they wouldn't have come. Everyone thinks it's 3 wise men, but it was just 3 gifts. And then we start to just think it's 3 wise men because of the 3 gifts. But they actually would have come with a big entourage into the town. And so they didn't come in quietly. they would have been seen and known, and people knew that they arrived, and they were wondering, what are these people here for? And so they were asking around, where's this new king? And so they caused a ruckus, and the news went back to Herod, and Herod heard then that people were looking for this new king. And if you are already a king, King Herod, you would not like this news that someone else has come to look for another king, not him. And so, I think it's amazing. Like, sometimes we don't know all the backstory, and it's really great to listen to some of the backstory that these men didn't just come quietly into the scene. They came with a big entourage. As I was getting ready today, I saw this big caravan driving past, and I was like, they would have come with big caravans and animals, and you would have known that they had arrived. And so Herod had heard about this, and then he wanted to find out where this new king was born. And so he summoned all of his religious teachers and people that knew the law, and he called them and he said, where is this king that they're looking for? And then they told Herod that he has been born in Bethlehem and that he is the Messiah. And so Herod then secretly called those wise men and said, I know where he is. I can tell you, so you can go and find him. So he was being very helpful. He said, I'll tell you where he is. He's in Bethlehem. And when you find him, let me know, because I want to go and worship him too. I want to bow down and worship him. And as we read through the story, and if you read through Matthew 2, you will see that the worship that Herod was trying to give Jesus was probably not something we would consider worship. So the wise men wanted to bow down at Jesus' feet, but Herod wanted to kill Jesus. So very different types of worship, aren't they? But he said, tell me where he is so that I may go and worship him. Maybe he's a little bit of a liar. So let's read on. Let's continue in verse 9. It says, so this is after their time with Herod. So after this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These wise men arrived to a house, it says. And Jesus was probably under the age of 2. So he was, when you look up the definition or the Greek word of child, he was in between infant and a toddler age. And they went to a house to see him. And so these wise men knew that a king had been born. And whether reading different commentaries, whether they knew the full extent of who he was and who he is debatable. But they knew that a king had been born. They knew that a king had been born, and they bought gifts for a king, fit for a king. Last week, Matt talked about the gift of gold, pointing to Jesus being our king, that he was royalty. And these men, they showed reverence in a way that Eastern rulers were accustomed to, that they would actually fall prostrate with their forehead to the ground when they met with royalty, with a king. I wonder how many of us do that when we come and worship Jesus. I've been thinking about that when we're in the presence of a king, and we are, like, how many times do we hit the floor with our foreheads to the ground in reverence of our King Jesus? And even if it's not physically, do we do that in our heart posture to him? Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And these gifts were so expensive and worth so much money that it probably funded their trip to Egypt, that when they were escaping Herod, who was trying to kill Jesus, this would have funded their journey to Egypt. All these little tidbits that you find out when you're researching. But today we are going to look at frankincense. And That's frankincense right there. So frankincense, it comes from a tree, comes from resin of a tree. So you scrape the bark of a tree and then this stuff drips out, and then it solidifies and it becomes like that. And it creates a beautiful, strong aroma. So I don't know, has anyone ever seen frankincense, smelt frankincense? Any hands up? Yeah. But it's a beautiful smell. Like I don't really love smells. They give me like hay fever. But I was like, I need to smell this, and I need to. When I'm usually studying a passage, I want to like somehow embody it. So you will hear my journey of going to find frankincense in a moment. But let's just talk about what frankincense is. So it is from a tree, the resin from a tree. You scrape it off and you burn it. So you have to heat it up and you burn it, and then it releases a fragrance and an incense. So at the time of Jesus's birth, frankincense was very expensive. It was not common. So it wasn't something you had in your normal household. You couldn't go to the bathroom and spray, the spray after the things are done. Like it wasn't a common odor that you would have in your house because it was so valuable and expensive for people. But the burning of frankincense, and this is really the key, the burning of frankincense was associated with ceremonial worship of a deity. Frankincense, the burning of it, was associated with the worship of a deity, the worship of a god. And in the Old Testament, I'm going to give you some of the Old Testament scriptures because I found it interesting, so you will find it interesting as well. And so frankincense in the Old Testament in Exodus, I'm not going to read it all, but God gives Moses a recipe to make that is a holy recipe, and it includes lots of different spices, resin droplets, mollusk shell, galbum, and I can't even say that, and a mix of pure frankincense. And I really want you to, as I've highlighted some of the things that I really want you to grab hold of, that actually for this incense to be created, it needed pure frankincense. And this was a pure and holy incense, and it must be treated with the utmost holiness. It wasn't something you just burn here and there. It was set aside to be burnt in the most holy of holy places in the old covenant. So when they would burn this, it says, grind some of the mixture into very fine powder and put it in front of the ark of the covenant where I will meet with you in the tabernacle. So this fragrance was sent up to God as worship, and then God would come and meet with the priest. And God is saying you must treat this incense as most holy and never to use it for anything else but for worship to me. So frankincense was such an important and powerful gift that was given to Jesus because it denoted worship of a God, worship of the God. So whether the wise men knew the fullness of who they were worshiping, that it was God in flesh, is unknown. But this gift points to his identity, that Jesus is our God. Jesus was God in flesh. So as we gather at this time of the year, and we see pictures of the baby Jesus in a manger, he is God in flesh. Fully human and fully God. And we read in John 1, it tells you, so the word, which was God, became human, became flesh, and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. This baby Jesus that we get to celebrate, especially at this time, because it's a time where the world gathers around and sees what is Christmas about. I remember years ago, I was teaching SRE, and we had a competition for people to, during Christmas time, it's a competition for best colouring of Christmas. And it was so amazing that people, they drew Christmas trees and Christmas gingerbread houses and Santa Claus. And when I chatted with them, like they didn't know what Christmas was. It's a stark, that's the reality of our world, that people they've missed what Christmas is. Little kids in schools that think Christmas is about Santa Claus. But these wise men, they teach us that Jesus was God, fully man and fully God. And I wonder for us as we are in this season, if we know the magnitude of who we're worshiping today. Do we know the magnitude of who we are worshiping today? Are we giving him the worship he deserves? Are we flat, our head prostrate, our forehead to the ground, worshiping him in all that we do, in all that we say? Because sometimes I feel like Christmas brings out the worst of people, just with the rush and the busy and even me. So it's just like, am I worshiping him in the best way that I can in this time, at this season? I feel like that's a hard-hitting question for a Christmas message. But I want to tell you a little bit about my journey to find frankincense. So I think every time I preach, share a message, I always want a prop. So if we just could go to the next slide. I want to talk to you about Jesus, our God, in many different ways. But I was helped with my message this time because I'm going to use some of the things that I've encountered over the last couple of weeks, finding frankincense, and just talk through Jesus being our God at this time. So I was like, if I'm talking about frankincense, I need to smell it, I need to experience it, I need to see what it looks like. So I Googled, which is what you do to find anything. So I Googled and found that I could find the essential oil if I went to a florist down on Queen Street in Campbelltown. So I went there, and it wasn't actually sold at this florist, but he told me where it was sold, and it was sold in another shop, which was called a healing center or a wellness center. I don't think I've ever walked into a healing center or wellness center in my life. Well, because anyway, but we'll go on from there. But I did go into the shop, and the shop had frankincense, real frankincense. So someone at Austral took some to burn. So you might, I don't know if anyone wants some. It's a little bit expensive, but this is frankincense that you can actually put in a burner, and it will release a beautiful aroma. But then I also bought some frankincense oil. And then the guy that ran the shop made me up a bit of a solution to spray. So I went into the shop. It's a very long story. I'm going to condense it for you right now. I went into the shop a couple of times. And every time I went in, there was a customer, talking to him. And he was counseling them. And there was one guy that was in there, and as I walked in, he was saying, just let out the emotion, let out the pain, don't stop it. And I was watching this happen, and this guy's crying, and it was very surreal. He's crying, and I had an appointment, so I had to leave. So I couldn't finish my exploration that day to find frankincense, but I came back another day, and the same thing happened, that the store owner was talking to someone, counseling them about their pain and about their whatever they were going through. And I'm looking in this shop, and I saw all these idols, like there was Buddha, there was things that looked like a demon, all these idols everywhere. And it made me just stop and think, the world is looking for a savior. The world is looking for someone that can heal their pain. The world is looking for someone that can comfort them. And I chatted to this guy who owns the store, and just, I was curious now then. I was like, oh, so what do you do here? What do you believe? And He's like, oh, I do all the meditation here. He was a lovely man, like such a lovely man. He was so helpful. I said, I'm doing this for church. And then he told me some things about frankincense, which doesn't matter about that. But it was just, so I asked him, like, do you know Jesus? And he's like, oh, yeah, well, I believe there's a higher power, is what he told me. And I was just like, yeah, that's the world believes that there's a higher power. But there is only one higher power, and it's Jesus, our God, who from him all things came about. And from him all things are held together. And, you know, the people that walk in there, I guess I've started to think, like, why is it much more easier for people to walk into a shop like that than walk into the doors of our church? Or walk into conversations with us when people are broken and hurting. And we have the answer. We have the answer. But people are going into that shop. I've started praying for that guy. I'm praying that he knows Jesus. I'm praying that he knows a higher power because he's searching for something. But he can't give away what he doesn't have. And it is a counterfeit going to those places. And, you know, as Christians, it's a counterfeit for me as well to bow down to other things. Like if I'm having a rough day or like you know, we all need to continually be looking and gazing at Jesus because we can start bowing down to other things as well. But I think it was an amazing thing. So, but there's more. So let me just continue. So everything is found in Jesus. He is whatever you need. You know, it's cliche, Jesus is the answer, but it's actually the truth. Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the answer that you need. Jesus is the answer. So then, look, my thing last week at Austral didn't really work out. I couldn't get everyone to smell this frankincense. I sprayed it on paper. It wasn't holding. And I'm very perseverant. Like I persevere. I'm like, I need another strategy to allow people to experience the smell. So I was talking to one of my colleagues and we're like, maybe material or, so then I went to Spotlight. And look, my frankincense is still not working. I've sprayed it on this. It's not holding. But anyway, I went to Spotlight and I met this lady who didn't really want to help me. She was working in another counter and then there was no one there to measure material. Another long story. But she came over to help me and we ended up talking and I just don't even know how we segued into this, but I must have said that I was looking for something to spray a perfume on and mentioned that I was a pastor at a church. And then and while she was serving me though, she said, oh, I don't like to come to this area because lifting those heavy reams, it's not good for my body. And then she was telling me her hand was hurting and don't tell me you're in pain because there's only one thing I want to do. So she told me her hand was hurting and then she was really insistent on helping me find the right material. I got to the point where I don't care anymore about this material. Anyway, it turns out she had been to our church. She had been to the hub and come here for a trivia night, which I thought was amazing that in all of the stores I meet this lady who knows this church. And so she did my measuring, did it all. And then I just said, oh, is it okay if I pray for your hand? And she said, yeah. So I prayed for her hand. I closed my eyes, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I closed my eyes and I was praying. And then when I opened, like she is like all crying. And I was like, okay, next time open your eyes when you're praying for someone. But anyway, she was, and then she's like, oh, can you, yeah, I learned that somewhere, didn't I? And then she said to me, oh, can you pray for my sister? She's got cancer. I was like, okay, let's not like, I believe Jesus is our healer. Jesus, God is our healer. He is our healer. So, you know, I love to pray. So if you have any ailments, come and see me. But Jesus is our healer. And So I prayed for her sister, and I walked away from that thinking, like I believe God for healing. But that day, God said to her, I see you. I see you. In this big wide world with billion people in Spotlight, in Campbelltown Mall, I see you. And I see your sister, and I see the pain that you're in. And Jesus is the healer. And so then there's one more thing that I just want to share, because there's one more story, which I thought was just baffling. So as I was looking for my frankincense, I went into Dusk. I don't know if people know Dusk at MacArthur Square, because that sells all the fragrances. Because I wanted to get it from Dusk. I didn't want to get it from the wellness center that is healing us. So I went to Dusk, because, that feels like more mainstream. I don't know. Do you have frankincense? No, I don't have frankincense. We have like mixtures with frankincense. And I was like, well, that's not going to help me. And then she just made this random comment. She goes, oh, I don't want to send you to Ronnie's. Does everyone know Ronnie's? Bargain basement shop. So she says, I don't want to send you to Ronnie's because they won't sell the pure frankincense. Like, really though? She says, I don't want to send you to Ronnie's because they will not sell you the pure frankincense. Remember I read in Exodus that Jesus wants pure frankincense? Selah, pause, think about all those things. God is trying to say something to us. God wants our pure worship. He doesn't want us to go to Ronnie's and get an imitation. He wants our pure worship. It costs something, That purity and that pure worship, it costs something. Like those gifts that were given to Jesus, they were expensive. And our pure worship costs something to us. I find this season is a really hard season to keep attentive to God. I find this season is fighting for our attention. Buy this gift, catch up with this friend, do this before the year is out. Rush, 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 rush. Life gets very demanding for our attention. And I found this beautiful quote from Mary Oliver, and she says, attention is the beginning of devotion. Attention is the beginning of our devotion. And John Mark Comer says that worship and joy start with the capacity to turn our mind's attention toward God, who is always with us in the now, right now, present to us. Oh, sometimes I don't know whether we know it, because I think we would be flat on our faces if we actually knew that. Our worship, our frankincense, our pure frankincense towards God is to turn our mind's attention toward the God who is always with us in the now. And I guess when I started today, and my prayer has been that this service, this time would just be a deep breath in, to be attentive to God, who is always attentive to us.